Hey guys, welcome to another Untech video. Today we're going to dive into scraping Microsoft's Research People, which is Microsoft's kind of online directory of all their top researchers, some developers, some engineers. This site has been thrown around the SourceCon community and the recruiting community. I believe I first saw it in a presentation back in 2017, and recently Dean DaCosta did a scraping video where he mentioned this website as well. I wanted to take that to the next step and show you two ways that you could go about scraping it. One using Dataminer, relatively simple, allow you to get, I think it's about 1,100 contacts. The other way, a little bit more complex, but will actually allow you to scrape into each additional profile and capture things like email, Twitter, and GitHub pages, bios, and a whole bunch of other keywords. And for checking us out at the end, you'll see a link that will actually show you all the data that I've scraped from this page. So if you're too lazy to try it and learn it for yourself, it's available for you. But first, before we kick off, a couple of acknowledgements here. Want to give a big shout out and a thank you to Hung Lee, who is the author of Recruiting Brain Food. He was nice enough to mention me in his blog this week. Actually, I had no idea he was doing it. It's great. Got a bunch of new subscribers out of it and a bunch of new people checking us out. So thank you for that. The other acknowledgement I want to make is to Greg Hawks, who's great. He runs another YouTube channel. I'll send a link to it in the description here, but definitely check his page out. He does some really good videos on recruiting and sourcing tools, scraping. He's great. I would definitely check out his video as well. He also runs the HR Sourcing Toolbox. Great place to go for ideas on different apps, programs, and all the articles he's written for SourceCon and other sources. So definitely check all that out. And on that note, we'll begin. Now, as you guys know, on this video series, we tend to slow things down a little bit, take it step by step, so some of the least experienced recruiters or sourcers or data scrapers can learn a little bit. So if you're more on the experienced side, you might want to fast forward this video a little bit. So we're going to start from the beginning here, and I told you I'd show you two ways, but actually I'm going to show you one way that doesn't work. So before I start a project, I always start from the most simplest way down to the most time intensive, hoping to get lucky along the way. My first go-to is always a program called Instant Data Scraper. Link will be in the description. In this case, you load it up and it just doesn't capture the table. I'll try another table, but you see we're just not getting the data we're looking for. In fact, it seems like it's capturing the data, but it's capturing it along a row instead of going down columns, which is what we want. So I assume I could probably manipulate this in Excel if I wanted to, but it's too much work. It's way too early. Just not gonna even bother doing that. So we're gonna proceed to Dataminer. If you guys haven't checked it out, go to Dataminer's webpage, download it. It's free. It's a Chrome app. I believe they give you like 10,000 free pages scraped before they make you upgrade to a paid version. Either way, I've not hit that limit, but it's good. It's a server-side application, meaning it doesn't happen in the cloud, it happens right in your computer. So for most web pages, it doesn't view you as a machine or a bot. It simply thinks you're just a person viewing their web page. And we're going to open it up by clicking on the Dataminer button up here on the toolbar, and it's going to load up right here. It looks to find recipes that other people already created, but as you see, there isn't any in the public ones. There is in mine, but for this purpose of this video, we're going to create this from the ground up, right? So really simple. We've just clicked new recipe, and here we are at the page here. We have two options, list or details. Now, details would mean everything's in one row, like if I was scraping a Best Buy product page, right? And I didn't want a bunch of columns, it's one product with a bunch of different categories. In this case, we're going to want a lot of rows and many columns, so we're going to go to list page. So let's make sure that's selected, which it is. Move on to rows. Now here's where it's going to get a little bit more complicated. So what we want to do is define each one of these little circles as a line on our spreadsheet, right, for a row itself. And to do that, unless you already know what the CSS class or HTML code is, we're going to click on Find, and you're going to see that the cursor has now been changed and is highlighting things. So we're going to do our best to not highlight the whole thing, but highlight just one box. And once you do that, you hit Shift, and it puts a little orange dotted line or jagged line around the box, indicating that's exactly what we want. And if you've seen this box over here, it gives us different element classes or an HTML element type. Now, you don't need to be technical or even know what these things are. Just know that you need one of them, and you got to figure out which one it is and do a bit of trial and error. So we could start with the LI tag. We could click it here, and you see it gets us what we want, but it also gets us all this extraneous stuff over here, right? Looks like it's highlighting all the filtered by names, these green boxes over here, a lot of stuff we don't need. That's not going to work for us. So we could try this. We could try the element class list. Now we have the margins bottom one, which actually looks like it gets us what we want, ironically enough. Let's try some others. So we have the XS column 12-24. Now I'm going to click that and scroll around the page. It looks like it's getting us everything we want. Confusingly enough, so do they all. Now, not quite sure the pros and cons of using each of them. Let's try in one area. We'll try with the 12-24, and if for any reason that doesn't work, we'll know we'll need to go back to this spot and redefine our rows. So we're going to click that, and it now shows us that we have 24 rows, which seem to make sense. Seems like it has everything we want here. So we're going to move on to the columns. Now, we're going to have to address this show more button over here because we need a way to tell the scraper to show us more. But for the sake of this, we're just going to keep it like it is here. And we'll play with that later on. So now we go down to the columns. Now here's where we're going to select what data we actually want. And we know we're going to want a couple things. We know we want name, right? That's not much we can get here, but so we're going to put in name, we're going to click find, and similar to what we did before, we're going to try to just highlight that name, press shift, see the box that shows up, and now we have to figure out which element class is actually going to get us what we need. We have H4, which we'll try out. Looks like it works. We have no margin bottoms. Clearly doesn't work because that's getting us everything. And we have body alt, which again gets us everything. So we're going to go with H4 because that is getting us what we need. And we're going to click OK. Now, to verify, 48 does match the 48 row count. So we know it's getting it all. And if we click this little eye icon, we could see if it skips any, if there's any hiccups. We could check the last one, which should be Keith, and the first one, which should be Omar. As you see, Omar is our first and Keith is our last. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like it's working. Now we're going to repeat that for title, which seems like the last available data that we're able to get here. And we're going to click on the title, press shift to select, and we have a couple options here. No margin bottom, which gets us everything, no go. Body alt gets us everything, no go. And P element, which looks like it avoids the name and only gets us the title. Let's go with P for a moment. And here we got 48, which makes sense. Let's click it. Starts with Research Software Engineer 2. Looks like you, Omar. And ends with Senior Research Software Developer Engineer, which is you, Keith. So looks like it got us everything that we need, everything that we're looking for here. So I'm confident that's going to work. So we're just going to X out of this box, and we have our two columns. Now there's nothing really more we could get here. Well, I lie, there is. What if we want to get the link to their actual profile? If you see, if I could click on their face, it's going to take me into a page where there's a bunch of other information here. Now, unfortunately, with this standalone version of Dataminer, I can't tell it to click to that link and then scrape additional information on the page. I think there's a way to do it with collections within Dataminer, but that believe that requires a paid account, and it's also a two-step process where you need to scrape the URLs and then it puts it into a giant to-do list. Either way, it might be helpful to have a reference point here. So we know that clicking on the name also links us there. So let's copy the name. Let's put URL. Let's use the selector that we use for the name, which you remember is H4. Again, you see it turns purple over here, indicating, well, it's the same as we have up in the name category. However, we don't want the text. We actually want the URL. So we're going to click that, and we're going to check to see if it worked. Works great. So we're good to go there. Now, as you noticed, I refreshed the page. It dropped from 48 to 24. Reason being is it's not showing any more elements. We still have to click the Show More button. So here is where we have to go into the navigation section, right? And actually, I'm completely wrong. Action Center. And we need to select one of these available actions. You have pre-scrape, click on elements. Okay, sounds plausible. Pre-scrape, scroll to end of page. Not really. Pre-scrape, infinite scroll with click. Before data is scraped from the page on a specific element to scroll to the next page. When end of page is reached, scrape your data. Sounds exactly like we want. We want it to keep on clicking. So we're going to use that. Now, for here, it's a little bit different. If you know the selector, you could put it in here, but it has this sort of global find box here. So we're going to click on that, and we're going to hover over the Show More button, select it with our Shift key, and we're going to have to figure out one of these buttons. So we have the HTML button. We have the blue I3. We have the Show More button. We have a regular button and have a no margin. So I don't know, but I'm going to go with the Show More button. I'm just going to take a wild guess here. And I'm going to confirm it here. And then we have to tell it to add this infinite scroll with click. Now, I don't know what the maximum amount of clicks it's going to take, so I'm going to up that number to 25. All right, make it 30 for good luck. Wait time is 3 seconds. Page loads pretty quickly. That should be suffice. And I'm going to add this. Oh, actually, sorry. Before I add it, I'm going to copy that Show More and put that in the selector there. And I want to test it out, right? So I'm going to click the test clicking. And if I'm successful, if this is the right element, this should expand. So let's test click it. Beautiful. Let's try it one more time just to make sure the code doesn't change. And it works. Max clicks 30, 3 seconds wait. That should be enough. If you find it's not scraping all your elements, you might need to give it more time for the page to load. In that case, increase that. So now that we have the selector written into the box, we have that configured. We're going to add it here. And we're pretty good to go. Looks like we have everything here. It's ready for a test. So I'm going to go into save. And let's save it as Microsoft Research People Untech example. I believe it should make it public, so you might be able to find this here. And I'm going to save it. And let's go ahead and run it. Now it's bringing up another box here, and I'm going to drag it down so you can see that it's actually scrolling this page down in the background as we're watching it. So even though it appears like it's not doing anything, it's constantly clicking on that load more button, and it's going to continue to do it until it reaches the end, whereas there is no more load more button, or we reach our 30 clicks. You know, with that, considering there's about 24 per page, let's just hope it doesn't reach its max. It's going to take a bit of time. But either way, you see that it's working in the background. And we won't know whether it's captured the right data until it's done with all the clicks. Now, the way around that is if you wanted to run a shorter test, is just eliminate that navigation function, right? Just have it do one, or, you know, yeah, or set it to 1 or 2 clicks in that show more button. This way, if it works, you could then do the full test run, having it do everything. Since I'm doing this in real time here, I just might as well show you how everything is done. So I'm actually gonna just pause the video for a second as this continues to load. Okay, now through the magic of video pausing, you see the scrape has been completed. Now, if you're noticing, the time has increased a little bit more than you thought it should. That's because my math at 6 a.m. in the morning when this is being recorded is a little bit off. 30 pages, of 24 results per page is only about 700. So it actually worked perfectly. It ended, but it didn't get everything because I didn't have the clicks up high enough. So I upped that to about 46, and here you see I've got 1,101 total rows. It's got me the name, it's got me the title, and it's got me the link to their Microsoft profile. And as you see, really easy. I could download it as a CSV or an Excel file, copy it to a clipboard. In this case, I put it right into a Google Docs. You could see it's here. And here you go. If I wanted to get their LinkedIn profile, there's a video that I did recently on a program that will do just that. So you could check out that video. And as you see, loads of developers, loads of researchers, scientists, engineers. It's amazing that they keep this database online, and there's not more people like us out there. So that's method number 1. Feel free to stop the video here if you feel like you've got enough, you got what you came for. However, if you want to go just a little bit deeper, we're going to use a second program that is a little bit more technical, Web Scraper IO, that's going to be able to click into each and every one of these profiles and extract the information. So it's going to make this spreadsheet essentially go from this to, let's see if I could unhide it, to this, where it's pulled their Microsoft emails, it's pulled their web addresses where available, their LinkedIn profiles, again, when they had it on their page. Didn't get much GitHub or Twitter, got some phone numbers now and then. Was able to pull their research areas or areas of expertise, and I sort of hid this a little bit, but let me expand it. You see it's getting everything separated really nicely from us, easily imported into a database or spreadsheet or whatever the case is, research areas, and of course their bios, which is completely throwing off my my spreadsheet, but almost everyone has a very long bio where they're listing out a little blurb about themselves. In this case, some of them are actually quite long. But again, if you're doing this to import it and to create a database, it's the sort of thing you probably want and probably want access to. So we're going to dive into that and show you guys something a little bit more technical, but again, free and a great way to get some of the data. All right, so let's begin. So method number 2 requires a program called the Web Scraper. You see, you get it at webscraper.io. Now, it's completely free. There is a limit, but it's really high. I've yet to reach it, and it's probably one of the cheapest to actually pay for. Now, they have a web scraper extension, which is what I'm going to be showing you, and a cloud web scraper, which is fairly new. I've played around with it a little. I'd probably stick with the web scraper until you're pretty confident, and you could kind of move to the cloud one. Now, what I really like about web scraper is its versatility. It's not as user-friendly as Dataminer, but it has a lot more ability to crawl or click on multiple links. It's a little bit complicated on how it does it. But another good part of it is they have a really nice documentary tutorial as well as forum where you could post your questions up, and there's a couple people on there, myself included, who will go in and answer your questions or try to figure out how to put together the sitemap, which is web scrapers recipes to Dataminer. So the support community is really strong. and there's a couple of people that seem to answer almost all your questions that don't even work for Web Scraper. So a lot of enthusiasts are sort of on the site. So you download it on Chrome, and it appears as a little spider-like web icon here. Now, it's a little bit different in that you won't find this, and actually I want to click off this page. You won't find this popping up with any cool icons when you click on it. In fact, the way you get to it is by right-clicking and going to the Inspect. So that brings up kind of the Development tab, if you will, where it shows you a bunch of technical things you most likely don't understand, because I don't get all of it. Web developers do, though, however. But it adds this tab called Web Scraper. And it starts on a box like this, and it starts with all your site maps, which again is like their formulas. It's the recipe that tells them, it tells it how to scrape a specific site. So I'm going to walk you through how I created it. It's a little bit more technical, so I'm not going to be creating it in real time, since it did require a bunch of trial and errors. And in fact, there are times where I'll actually have Dataminer as well as a couple other programs open at the same time, trying to figure out how to write these recipes the best that I can, because it seems both Web Scraper, Dataminer, and some of the other ones interpret some of the visual field selections just a little bit different. So I'm going to walk you through how this is created. So here we are at the beginning of the scrape, and the first thing that I created, and I called it selector link, is called an element click. Now, it offers a bunch of different types. You want to get the text, the link. Is it a pop-up link? Is it an image, a table, an element scroll down? And I'm not going to get into in depth on what all these things do, but just know element click is what you'd want if the URL isn't actually changing. And in this case, the first thing we need to do is address this show more button. So I click that, and it'll now give me a couple different options: selector, click type, and click element uniqueness. So first thing we do is need to configure the selector and the click selector. Now, in short, click selector is the actual button, the action it's going to take. Selector is the group of text that you wanted to focus on for further scraping. Think of it almost like defining the rows in Dataminer, right? So obviously we're going to use this button, no margin button, which is similar to the one we use in Dataminer. And you could either put it in here, or you could click select, and it'll actually, similar to Dataminer, you can click on what you want. It will come up button, and you select it, and you're done. Element preview lights it up if you're right. In this case, it turns red. Now, selector is going to be exactly the same as we did in Dataminer with the rows. As you see, I'm using that same class, the XS column 1224. And when I element preview it, you see it's right because it's forming this red box around each one of these, letting me know that it knows that each one is a different row. Now, for this, since we're telling it to click over and over and over again, we need to make sure that the click type is set to click more, so it keeps on doing it. And multiple, because we've not just selected one block, we've selected multiple blocks, and this multiple is really tying back to this selector here, because we just don't want to scrape Christian. We want Christopher and Hadass and Ray and all those other things. And the click selector uniqueness, this is something I don't know too much about. I tend to play around with it. It's set default unique text. If that doesn't work, sometimes I'll do a unique CSS selector. Again, my knowledge on how that works or why that works isn't really up to snuff, so we'll save that there. So we've now told it to click on this link over and over again, and we're going to now create the next branch of our tree by clicking in selector link, which means we're not putting recipes in the root. We're sort of telling it, okay, now that you've selected what you need to, right? Now what are we going to do with it? And I've created 3 different things here, and I'm going to show you one of them. Well, I'm going to show you all of them, but we're using the semi-bold, which, if you remember, is the same thing we used in Dataminer. So the first thing I wanted to get is the name. So I've clicked that I wanted a text, and I'm going to scroll up for a second so you could see how this has changed from the previous screen. When I go to select, it's only lighting up 1. Why is that? That's because in the previous screen, we told it multiple, so it understands what we need to do to one, we need to do to everything. And I need to select that first one. Now, I can highlight it and select it here, and it's done semibold X hidden focus. And that very well might work. I've sort of truncated it only because I know this other one works from our experiment with Dataminer, so I'm going to keep it as just semibold here and not change it to any of these other ways. You could test it out, see what works. In this case, you could click View Data. It will show you if it's working. The only thing that, the reason I'm not going to do it is because there's 1,100 things here. I don't have time for it to go through everything. So click Done Selecting. I'm just going to reformat that to dot semibold. I could click Element Preview. You see the red box within the yellow box indicates I have what I want. No need to click multiple because it inherently now understands, since we clicked multiple in the last one, that this is really a model that is going to be applied for everything. And I'm going to click Save. And you see I did that same thing for the title. Element Preview, it's clicking the title. And here, as you see, I'm using the same semibold, but it's a little bit different because I've now told it it's a link, right? Same Element Preview, it's still clicking on the name, but instead of getting us the name, it's going to click through into that. So we have that set up. Next, we need to tell it what to do after it clicks through into it. So I'm going to click that here, and what we need to do is also advance this. So I'm just going to click on here because we're now scraping a different page, so we need to be cognizant of that here. So here it's loading up the typical profile, and there's a bunch of things we want here. We want to get their research area. Here we want to get their about, maybe some of their website information. And here you see I've selected a bunch of different things here, and I'm going to go over them. The research area, I'm going to click Element Preview, is getting everything here. This was a difficult one for me because it changes based on the person, but I'll highlight that I use the group element type because I realize that I don't want just one of them. I don't want multiple lines, and if I click Data Preview here, it's showing me that I'm getting sort of what I want. Here is the part I don't understand. It's inserting these characters here, and I was able to edit that out very easily in post-production in Excel. And I'm not quite sure this is how the code is set up. Possibly one of you guys who are watching this can help with that. But it got me what I want, so we're going to save that there. I've done the same with email. I've sort of said instead of getting a text, I want an element attribute because I don't want it to say, oh, this one doesn't have an email address, but I don't want it to actually say the email address. I want it to get the href or the link through it. I'll give you a better example here. Let's go down to their LinkedIn. This guy has one. Here I want to get that LinkedIn, but if I put text, it's just going to get the word LinkedIn. So I did element attribute and I put href, which is really technical, but it essentially is going to get the hyperlink reference code, which is the website, which is what you want. Now, the .LinkedIn is very interesting because when I tried to get it here by clicking on LinkedIn, it gave me this really long phrase and didn't get me anything. So it was a little bit frustrating there. So I was able to, I think I went actually into Dataminer, and that was able to find me the right class, which was the .LinkedIn, which essentially got me what I wanted. And I had to add this A tag here, which again was a bit of trial and error. Essentially, I went into inspect to see where it was, and it was embedded in an href, which I knew, and it had this A tag. So I was able to incorporate that in and distill it down and get exactly what we wanted instead of this X hidden focus, which I'm actually not quite sure whether that was thrown in intentionally as a countermeasure to scraping, but it confused everything. So I was able to do that and do the same with the GitHub, do the same with the Twitter. Again, these selectors I was able to get through Dataminer because the ones it gave me wasn't correct. Bio, LinkedIn profile, or linked out profile. So this is one that doesn't get everything, but I noticed that some people had a link within their bio to their resume. So I tried to capture that, didn't really work. And phone number, very few people had it, but this is what it gave us. And if you see, if I click on this element, it's not showing us anything because it's not here, but it's showing us the LinkedIn, the bio lights up, the Twitter lights up, because those are all elements here. So that's basically given us what we wanted. And generally, when you're doing it like this, it's worthwhile to click into another profile and see, are your element selectors right? Does it change from page to page? And in here, you see it got me the right research. Doesn't have an email, but it did pick up. It doesn't have a website. Oops. Or a GitHub, but it does have a Twitter. So let's see if it got us a Twitter, which it did. It has a bio, which it got us. It's nothing linking out. And it does have their phone number, which I was able to get using this one right here. So that's really good. It didn't get us his address right here, but then again, we didn't include that in it. And I didn't even bother going to this publication tab. That would be a separate selector and a whole hassle in and of itself. So it looks like we're good to go there. Sometimes, if something's going to take a long time, I'll give you an example, you might have to put a delay in here. Delays are useful when you're going to get marked as a potential web scraper, your IP blocked, or if it's taking time to load and you want to give it a bit of a delay. Here, I found that wasn't necessary. So now that we're done there, to run this thing, we just simply click on the sitemap and go to scrape. And I will export the sitemap and post it in the description so you can essentially go in here, import that sitemap yourself, and away you go. So think of it as like a shared recipe in that sort of way. So let's give it a run. Let's click scrape. It gives us two options, request intervals and page load delay. Again, you'd increase these to slow it down. Request interval is how many times it's actually pinging the website. Some websites will mark you as spam if you don't increase this. And page load delay gives it time to load. It'll let you go as low as 1,000 and as high as the sky's the limit. But the higher this number goes, the longer it takes each individual page. So let's run it, and you see it pops up this new window. I'm gonna keep it over here and see if I can't go back in here to show you what it's actually doing. So as you see, well, you got to scroll down to see it. It's now going through this. It's clicking on the page load more elements. And it's going to keep on doing that. You can see this bar moving up, showing that there's more elements until it's received all the elements on the page. Now, it seems like it's going pretty quickly, so I'm not going to pause the video. Well, actually, yes, I am. Let me see if I can cut down on the size. All right, it's just about done with this initial step. And again, a bit of set it or forget it. Once you know it works, just minimize this and go on your business and collect the results when you're done. I've let it run for hours and hours on end. There was some very large scrape jobs I did where I literally let it run overnight and just cross my fingers and hope I would get what I needed. And it worked perfectly. Obviously, it stores everything within your Chrome memory, so there is a point where you will overrun that and end up crashing it. However, I haven't reached that point yet. Maybe that's something I'll aspire to in the future, taking it to its limit. So we're at the end of this, at the W's here. So we'll keep it, we'll show you a little bit when it starts running, and then we'll end this video so you don't have to sit here and watch the whole scrapes. All right, finally at the Z's. All right, here we go. So now we're at the end. So now it's taking all those and it's going to move to the next step, which is that link selector that's going to tell it to go into each individual profile. And then it's going to start scraping from those profiles. So here we go. I'm just going to maximize this, and as you see, it's now going through each individual profile. Sometimes I don't know why it chooses the order. It tends to scrape from the bottom up, and I'm not quite sure why. Here it seems to be a bit randomized. But as you see, it's going through each one. Some of them have a lot of details. Some of them have very little details, but it's going through it. Now, I'm going to bring this off my screen for a moment. It is still running, and I'm going to show you that in real time you could see the data that's coming out by clicking refresh here. And this is a way for you to see if it's actually getting you what you want. So here, ignore some of the stuff. It's copying some URLs. It's giving me the name, the link to their profile, and the actual link, so I'll have to edit that out later. The research areas seem like they're coming down, and email, web addresses, LinkedIn, GitHub, Twitter, bio, and so far none of these have had phone numbers. Now you see it's putting in null when that information isn't available. Here it got a phone number, another phone number, and you see it's consistently getting their email addresses, so it seems like that's LinkedIn is over here. So you see it's pretty clean. There will be some things we'll need to edit out just depending on how it goes. I believe there was a field that was getting a bunch of garbage characters, but I could show you in another video how to just do a find and replace and get rid of those. So it seems like for all intents and purposes it's working. This won't refresh unless you tell it to refresh. But yeah, you can see it's getting most of them, having some trouble in some of these, but either way it's getting you 99% of what you want. And even when it's messing up, the pattern of /n/ffffff is going to make find and replacing very, very easy. So at the end of this, or whenever you want to kill it, you could either X out of this and it'll end the scrape, or it'll actually show you a pop-up when everything is done. Then all you need to do, and I'm just going to go back to the top here, is click on this and export data as CSV, and you're good to go. If I did this now, it would get me just the data that we've received. But again, it will turn this into this. And as you see, it cleaned up really well. I was able to eliminate all those garbage characters. So everything's nice and neat and ready to be imported. So again, a little bit more technical. Might take a little trial and error, but if you have a project and it needs to click through multiple links or options, WebScraper.io is a great place to start. Some other programs that have it, like ParseHub, Octoparse, and there's a few other ones. I think Dexy also does it. I've played around with those programs, but these seem to be my first go-tos for a variety of different reasons. As problems pop up and as I'm trying to figure out how to do things, I might include some videos of those in the future. So thank you guys for watching. Thanks for checking out the video. You'll see a link to everything we described here, the programs, the results, and I'll include the formula for this in the description as well. Thank you guys. If you enjoyed this, please share it, like it. Hope this helps you out. Thank you guys.